Did you know that gaslighting comes from a 1944 film where a husband manipulates his wife into doubting her own sanity? Hysterical started as a medical term blaming women's emotions on a wandering uterus, and Drink the Kool-Aid is tied to a 1978 cult tragedy where 900 people died from a poisoned punch. Cool history, weird origins, some judgment, okay? Stick around for rapid fire stories behind these words that we use every single day with really dark backstories, okay? If you enjoyed this video, learned something new, hit subscribe, we're almost to 5 million, and drop your favorite phrases down in the comments and I'll tell you where it comes from. Let's dive in. Gaslighting has a name origin with a cinematic twist, okay? The word comes from a 1938 play called Gaslight and the 1944 film based on it. It's a story where a husband dims the gas lights in their house at night, then insists to his wife that nothing has changed. The whole plot is about her doubting her own senses and her sanity. That's why gaslighting became shorthand for psychological manipulation, making somebody question their memory, perception, and even reality. It's one of those rare cases where a Hollywood script gave us a new word for a very real kind of abuse. It's mind games and reality twisting, and today the word gets thrown around a lot online, but when it fits exactly, it hits hard. Hysterical comes from the literal straight Greek word hyster, meaning uterus, and ancient doctors actually believed that women's wombs could literally wander around their bodies, and they thought that wandering uteruses caused mood swings and panic and outbursts. In the 19th century, European and American physicians turned hysteria into a catch-all diagnosis for women. Everything from anxiety to fainting to sexual desires got labeled as hysteria, and treatments ranged from bed rest to institutionalization to straight up cures that we would never accept as medicine today. I'm telling you, doctors would just penetrate women to treat hysteria. And now the label became like a tool used to dismiss women's emotions as irrational or medical problems. And that's why when somebody is called hysterical today, it still has that echo of dismissal. And it just means that you're like frantic and overworked and panicked, and the new word has a double life. It's kind of interesting. On one hand, it still means like overly emotional. On the other, it kind of means like absolutely hilarious. And the word shift started as a theory about wandering wombs. That's insane. The phrase cakewalk sounds like a breeze, but it started in slavery. Enslaved people created a dance where they exaggerated and mocked the stiff, formal manners of their white owners. The best performers won cake as a prize. That's where the name comes from. White audiences thought it was hilarious and began copying it, completely missing the satire. Over the time, though, cakewalk drifted into stage shows and minstrel performances, and then into mainstream English. And today, it just means like something easy or effortless, but the roots were a parody born out of oppression. Mad as a Hatter isn't just an Alice in Wonderland whimsy, it comes from a real workplace poisoning. In the 18th and 19th century, hat makers used mercury nitrate to cure felt. Day after day, exposure meant tremors, slurred speech, memory loss, and erratic behavior. People joked that hatters were literally just mad when they were really being poisoned on the job. Lewis Carroll borrowed some image for the Mad Hatter character, and the phrase stuck. Now it just means completely nuts or bonkers, but it started as a dark occupational history. Basket case. This phrase surfaced around World War I. Rumors spread around soldiers that were so badly wounded with all 4 limbs gone. They had to be carried around in baskets. Official reports denied such cases even existed, but the rumors spread like wildfire in newspapers. Basket case became shorthand for somebody helpless. By the mid-20th century, it shifted again, used to be described as somebody emotionally falling apart. Today, we would say like total mess or train wreck. The gruesome battlefield rumor got lost, but the phrase stayed alive. Pipe dream. In the 19th century, pipe dream were the hallucinations of smoking opium pipes. Newspapers used the phrase to mock wild or unrealistic plans, linking them to drug-induced fantasies. The opium dens of London and New York gave the image cultural weight, even as the practice was punished in the shadows. The word stuck though, stripped of its narcotic context. Now when somebody calls your idea a big pipe dream, they just mean like an unrealistic plan, not that you're hitting an opium pipe. White elephant. The phrase comes from the legends in Southeast Asia. The albino or white elephant were considered sacred, symbols of power or divine favor, but they were also incredibly expensive to maintain and couldn't be put to work. So stories say that kings would gift white elephants to their rivals, knowing the upkeep would ruin them financially. The phrase crossed into the English language in the 19th century, meaning extravagant but useless possession, and today we use it as a party game. Like, that's crazy. Did you know the word deadline was once a real line with very deadly consequences? In the Civil War prison camps, guard marked a boundary on the ground called the deadline. Cross it, even by accident, and you were going to be shot instantly. It was meant to keep prisoners from escaping, but it created a zone of constant fear inside the camp. That word eventually drifted out of the prisons and into everyday English, and today we just use it for due dates, project cutoffs. It's a wild shift from a rule that could literally and probably did kill people to something that we just stress about, like homework or office work. Stockholm Syndrome. The phrase was born from a single event in 1973 during a bank robbery in Stockholm. Hostages spent 6 days trapped with their captors, and when they were freed, one of them even publicly defended the robbers and criticized the police. A psychiatrist coined the term Stockholm Syndrome to explain it, the idea that hostages bond with captor as a survival response. The phrase somehow spread through the media and psychology, but many experts now question whether it's a real condition or just a catchy label. Today we use it casually for any case of trauma bonding, but it began with like one robbery headline that went global. No can do or long time no see. These two phrases look harmless now, right? No can do sounds like casual shorthand. Long time no see is just a goofy way to greet somebody. But did you know that when they first showed up in the English language newspaper in the late 1800s, it was not everyday talk, but they were jokes. Writers would deliberately imitate what they thought Chinese immigrants or Native Americans sounded like when trying to speak English. It was called mock pigeon English. The humor from exaggerated broken English was used as punchlines, so when people read no can do, they pictured a foreigner stumbling through English. Blech. Fast forward a century and the mockery part has been forgotten about, but the phrase is stuck in our everyday speech, stripped of their original sting, and that can be turned into permanent parts of American English. It's kind of wild to think that we're repeating old punchlines from over 100 years ago without realizing it. Like, we should all be canceled. No. Gypped. I read that a lot of people don't use this. I feel like I've used this before, so I'm sorry. Gypped. I got gypped. It's been around in American English since the late 1800s. Most dictionaries trace it back to gypsy, a word long used for the Romani people. The stereotype was baked in that Romani people were cheats or swindlers. The idea spreads in jokes, newspapers, and eventually it got into everyday slang. So when somebody says they were gypped, it carries an echo of a little bit of prejudice. Today, a lot of style guides and dictionaries flag it as offensive, but you still hear it popped up. It means like ripped off, scammed, cheated. What's interesting though is how invisible the connection became. Most people don't even realize the word hides the whole history of the stereotype behind it. Bite the bullet. Before anesthesia, surgery was brutal. Soldiers that needed amputations on the battlefield had very few options. They were handed a bullet to clamp down on while the doctor sawed through flesh and bone. It didn't stop the pain, but it gave them something to focus on and kept them from biting their own tongues off. Some historians argue that the phrase also spread metaphorically as like a brace yourself. Either way, bite the bullet survived as a vivid metaphor for facing something painful head on. And now we toss it around for stuff like sitting through a boring meeting, but the original image was a little bit more gory than that. Banana Republic. This one's a bit more modern and political. In the early 20th century, US fruit companies like United Fruit built empires in Central America, and they propped up dictators, and they toppled governments, and they exploited local economies to protect banana exports. Writers called these nations banana republics, countries dominated by foreign corporations and dependent on just this one export: bananas. The phrase stuck in global politics today, but it means like unstable state controlled by outside interests. But the history is how fruit companies literally make or break a nation. Drink the KoolAid. You probably know that this comes from like one of the darkest cult stories of the 20th century. 1978, over 900 members of the People's Temple followed their leader, Jim Jones, to Jamestown. Under his orders, they drank a cyanide-laced punch. It mass poisoned men, women, and children. Here's the twist though. Most eyewitnesses report saying that it wasn't even KoolAid. It was a cheaper brand called Flavor Aid. but drink the Kool-Aid stuck in the public imagination. And today we use it to just mean like following blindly or buying into somebody without questioning. And a wild phrase that got tossed around in like workplaces now and sports teams. It's one of the greatest cult tragedies. It's just like, dude, we just casually use this? But we casually use a lot of words that are horrific. Grandfathered in. Did you know that this one comes straight out of post-Civil War voting laws? After the 15th Amendment gave black men the right to vote, southern states scrambled away to try and block them, okay? They rolled out literacy tests, polling taxes, and other barriers. But the problem was, now poor white voters couldn't pass those tests either, so the solution was the grandfather clause. If your grandfather could vote before 1867, a time when black men couldn't vote at all, then you were automatically exempt from this. That loophole meant that illiterate white men still got to vote while black men were locked out and had to work harder for the same right. And the phrase stuck. Today we use it as, oh, you grandfathered in, like we mean it, you get to keep an old benefit under new rules. Legacy status, vesting rights, or existing user exemptions, right? It's a wild phrase that we use for gym memberships or phone plans, but it started as a legal tool for disenfranchisement. Franchisement. Y'all know I can't read. Peanut gallery. Today when somebody says that, we think like comments from hecklers or just like hot takes from the very back row. But quick history note, in the 1920s to 1930s, there was a popular, almost circus act called the Vanderbilt Theater, and at the very top balcony was the cheapest tickets you could buy. The audience up there were very famous for throwing peanuts, literally tossing them on stage if they didn't like an act. That's where the nickname, the Peanut Gallery, came from. But here's the part that I don't think most people realize, is a lot of the southern venues, those cheap balconies also overlapped with segregated sections where black audiences were forced to sit, so the term carried both the cheap seats and the shadow of segregation. What started as rowdy balconies, peanuts flying, and even segregated politics has survived into a quick way to just shut down critics. Language is always going to carry some baggage. Sometimes it's wild, sometimes it's dark, sometimes it's just plain weird. But none of these origins make you a bad person for using these phrases. Think of them as like little history notes inside everyday words. Once you know the story, you get to decide whether you get to keep it or swap it or flex it as trivia at your next party. I just want to know what surprised you most today, okay? If you liked this video, be sure to drop a like. If you didn't, let me know why down in the comments. I actually read them. If you're new here, be sure to hit subscribe. We're almost at 5 million and you can help us push over that line, okay? Stay curious, stay questioning. I'll see you next time.